At 22 minutes past 10 in the morning, Japan was winning World War II. 5 minutes later, they had lost it. 4 aircraft carriers, the pride of the most powerful navy on Earth, ambushed in the middle of the Pacific by a fleet that wasn't supposed to exist. And the reason it worked is almost absurd. A fake message about drinking water. This is the story of the most decisive 5 minutes in military history. How a codebreaker in slippers, a crippled ship rebuilt in 3 days, and 30 men who flew into certain death flipped an entire ocean. And one of those 30 saw the whole thing happen, floating alone in the water. 6 months earlier, Japan owned the Pacific. Pearl Harbor was burning. Singapore had fallen. The Philippines, gone. Victory after victory, across a third of the globe, the Japanese Navy seemed unstoppable. Now Admiral Yamamoto wanted to finish the job, destroy America's last aircraft carriers, and the war in the Pacific would be over before America could build more. His bait was a speck of sand 1,000 miles past Hawaii, 2 square miles called Midway. Attack it, and the American carriers would have to come out, straight into the guns of the largest fleet Japan had ever assembled. But in a basement at Pearl Harbor, the ambush was already falling apart. Station Hypo, a windowless bunker of code machines and exhausted men, run by Commander Joseph Rochefort, a chain-smoking obsessive who worked 20-hour days in a red smoking jacket and slippers. His team had cracked fragments of the Japanese naval code. They could see a massive operation coming, aimed at a target codenamed AF. Rochefort swore AF was Midway. Washington disagreed. Some said Alaska, some said Hawaii itself. So Hypo set a trap made of words. Midway radioed, uncoded, that its water plant had broken down. 2 days later, a Japanese intercept. A 2F is short of fresh water. Gotcha. The hunter's ambush now belonged to the hunted. Admiral Nimitz bet every carrier America had left on a basement. There was one problem. America had 3 carriers, on paper. The Yorktown was limping home from the Coral Sea, so badly wounded the engineers said repairs would take 90 days. Nimitz stood in the dry dock, looked at the hole in her hull, and gave them 3. 1,400 workers swarmed her around the clock, welding by floodlight, still aboard as she sailed. 3 days later, Yorktown went back to war with the patches still warm. Just after dawn on June 4th, 1942, Japanese bombers hammered Midway itself, while their scouts searched for the American fleet they believed was 1,000 miles away. One scout plane from the cruiser Tone launched half an hour late. That half hour would decide everything. Because when Admiral Nagumo's carriers began rearming for a second strike, bombs off, torpedoes on, fuel lines snaking across the hangar decks, the late scout finally radioed enemy carriers to the east. Nagumo hesitated. His hangars were packed with fuel and stacked ordnance. He decided to recover his planes first. It was the most expensive decision of the Pacific War. Then, out of the haze, came 15 slow, obsolete American torpedo planes. Torpedo Squadron 8, no fighter escort, no backup, flying machines so outdated, their own pilots called them Coffins. Their commander, John Waldron, had told them the night before, "If only one plane is left, I want that man to go in and get a hit." The Zeros swarmed them. One by one, all 15 went into the sea. 29 of 30 men died. Not one torpedo hit. Ensign George Gay, shot down, wounded, hid under a floating seat cushion, the only man of his squadron left alive. It looked like the most pointless sacrifice of the war. it was the opposite. Every Japanese fighter was now down at sea level, and the sky above the fleet stood empty. And at that exact moment, 10,000 feet up, a man who should have turned back was still searching. Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey's dive bombers were past the point of no return on fuel, and the ocean below was empty. Then he saw it. A lone Japanese destroyer running at full speed, cutting a white arrow through the sea. He followed it. At 10:22, 50 American dive bombers, McCluskey's group, and Yorktown's, converging by pure chance at the same minute, tipped over into near-vertical dives onto carriers whose decks were pinned with returning fighters, whose hangars were packed with fuel hoses and stacked bombs. Kaga erupted. Then Akagi, one bomb, straight through the flight deck, into the hangar, into everything stored there. Then Soryu. By 10:27, 3 of Japan's 4 carriers were funeral pyres. George Gay watched it all from the water. 1 carrier remained. Hiryu struck back within the hour, and her bombers found Yorktown, the ship that shouldn't have been there, and tore her open. The 3-day miracle ship absorbed the entire Japanese counterblow and stayed afloat long enough to save almost all of her crew. That evening, American bombers found Hiryu. By morning, she was gone, the 4th carrier in a single day. Yorktown held on for 2 more days, until a submarine's torpedoes finally took her. She was the price, the only carrier America paid. In 5 minutes, the war in the Pacific had reversed. Japan lost 4 fleet carriers, a heavy cruiser, over 3,000 sailors and airmen, and hundreds of aircraft. Losses her shipyards could never replace. America lost around 360 men, and the Yorktown. Historians still argue the exact numbers and whether those 5 minutes were miracle or mathematics. What no one argues is what came after. Japan never launched another major offensive in the Pacific, ever. George Gay was pulled from the water after 30 hours, the sole witness in the world's front row seat. And Joseph Rochefort, the man in the slippers who made all of it possible, Washington took the credit and shelved him. His medal came 40 years too late, 10 years after he died. 5 minutes. Bought in a basement, a dry dock, and the cold water of the Pacific.